Hi friends, are you ready for the next chapters of Front Desk? When we left off, Mia was trying to help the police figure out who had stolen that car because she knew that Frank had not done it. And she was trying to help them figure out maybe some other leads. All right, are you ready? Here we go. Chapter 25. As Lupe was leaving the motel, a car pulled in and someone got out. My dad and I went to greet her. It was another immigrant. My mother's face softened when she saw it was a woman this time. Aunt Ling was a friend of Uncle Lee's, and she was so famished she practically inhaled the dumplings my mother made at dinner. "Eat up, there's plenty here," my mother said, even though I knew that wasn't really true. In between bites, the woman told us that she'd been working at a nail salon down in Irvine, California. "Irvine," my dad said. "That's supposed to be nice." "Isn't that by the beach?" my mom asked. "Well, I never got to see it," Aunt Ling said. "I spent the entire time hunched over, kneeling on the floor. She told us how she would hold the hands of wealthy American women, and they complained right in front of her about their Chinese maids and how they were probably taking things because don't they all steal? It was like I wasn't even there. They didn't even see me," she said. "I was just a nail clipper to them." My mother reached for Aunt Ling's hand. "Well, you see," she said. "Well, we see you," she said. My mother and I led Aunt Ling over to room 1, our best room. Aunt Ling was so touched by our hospitality, the next day she insisted on doing my mother's nails. "Oh, that's very nice of you, but it's not necessary," my mother said bashfully, tucking her hands under her armpits to help hide them from Ling. "Let me see," Aunt Ling insisted. "Don't be shy." "Yeah, Mom, come on, let's see," I said. Reluctantly, my mom put her hand out in front. We gasped. My mother's once shiny, smooth fingernails were now dry, yellow, and rough. The cleaning supplies she used every day to clean the rooms must have somehow seeped through her gloves and into her nails. Her nails were practically melting off of her hands. "It's been like this for weeks," my mom said, tears coming to her eyes. "I don't know what to do. It's all that Ajax and bleach." "Don't panic, I know just the thing," Aunt Ling said. She got up and went to the kitchen, where she grabbed a cut-up lemon from the fridge and baking soda from the cupboard. Next, she filled the 2 bowls of warm water. She put the baking soda into the bowls and soaked my mom's hands in them. After half an hour, she lifted each hand up and scrubbed the nails with the lemon. I watched as she worked, scrubbing and drying, polishing and cleaning. And when she was finally done, the nails looked transformed. She was able to get rid of most of the roughness, and what she couldn't get off, she covered up with a coat of glossy red nail polish. My mom was beaming. "Quick, take a picture," my mom said. I smiled and kneeled down before her and Aunt Ling. I pretend clicked my finger as Mother had held her beautifully manicured hands out to the camera. "Eggplant," I said. As we waited for Mother's nail polish to dry, I asked Ling where she was headed next. "Sacramento," she announced. There was some new nail salons opening up there. "You're going to Sacramento?" I asked. One of the addresses from the ledger was in Sacramento. I leaped out of the chair and raced over to the front desk to get the ledger. "Can you do me a favor? Can you swing by this address? I need you to check something out for me." Aunt Ling promised she'd go by the address when she got to Sacramento. If the Thunderbird were there, she'd call right away. Before she left, she asked my mom whether she could tell any of her friends about the Calvista. "They could really use a place to stay. Their boss gave them the boot and they're living out of their cars," she said. "Ooh, that's hard," my mom said, grimacing. "We've been there." My parents exchanged a look. "The only thing is our boss, Mr. Yao," my dad said. "He lives right here in Anaheim." "Sometimes he doesn't come for weeks, though," I reminded them. "He has motels all over the place." Aunt Ling put a well-manicured finger to her chin. "You know what would be great? If you guys had a sign or something for when he's here," she thought out loud. "You mean like a 'don't come in' sign?" I chuckled. "Yeah, but not something he'd understand," she said. "A secret sign that only we understood." I looked around the front desk. My eyes fell on an old blue Yankees baseball cap. I picked it up. "How about this?" I asked Aunt Ling. Her eyes widened. "Yes," she exclaimed. "That's perfect." Chapter 26. It was agreed that from now on, if we put the blue hat in front of the desk, it meant to come in. On the front desk, it meant don't come in. Mr. Yao is there. And no hat meant come on in. We all shook hands on the new system, and Aunt Ling got into the car and drove off. I hoped she would tell all her friends that we would soon get lots of visitors who were heading in the direction of the 4 remaining addresses. Lupe was delighted to hear I was marching forward with my plan to show, not tell. She came over again the next day after school. The two of us sat on the front desk, where as usual she proceeded to draw trees. "Why are you always drawing those trees?" I asked her. Lupe didn't look up. Her eyes were completely focused on the page. Today she was drawing a massive oak with tiny little lines in the trunk. "I like trees," she said, shading in the bark. She didn't just like trees. She was obsessed with drawing them and really good at it too. There was so much detail in her creations, hundreds of twigs and branches and leaves, which she would labor on for over hours. She pulled out a blank piece of paper from the fax machine. "Here, I'll teach you," she said. I looked at her wary. I wasn't exactly what you call artistic. The idea of a good portrait was a smiley face with sunglasses. "You want to start off with the trunk," she said, pointing to my paper. I did as I was told and drew thick lines for my trunk. "Not so straight," she said. She took her pencil and started making little vertical lines, lumps, and curves in my trunk. "Now, no tree is perfect. Remember that," she said. "That's what gives it character." I smiled at Lupe, and how grown up she sounded. It was one of the things I liked most about her. She showed me how to add branches to my trunk. According to her, the easiest way to draw branches and twigs was to make lots of little tiny V's. It was hard work making all those little V's, and I got a little impatient, so I started shading in my tree, eager to get on with it. "Don't rush," Lupe said, frowning at my shading and pointing at the little twigs on her tree. "See, it's all in the detail." We worked side by side for an hour, neither of us saying anything except for occasionally borrowing the eraser. So deep we were into our drawings that we nearly jumped when Hank came in and knocked on the door. I buzzed him in. "Hey, can I have Mr. Yao's number?" Hank asked. "What for?" I asked him. "Didn't you say he had all those other motels? Maybe he needs a handyman," Hank said. "You want to ask Mr. Yao for a job?" I asked. I glanced at Lupe. But what?" Hank asked. He leaned into me. "Come on, Mia, I'm desperate." I wanted to tell him that didn't matter how desperate he was, Mr. Yao was not going to go for it. Not after all the horrible things that he had said the night when the car got stolen. But then I looked into Hank's eyes. He was one of the first who warned me about Mr. Yao. There's no way he would be asking me if he didn't have any other options. So I dialed the number and handed him the phone. "It's ringing," I told him. As Hank picked up the phone and started talking to Mr. Yao, Lupe and I hopped off our stools and went to my room. Gently, I picked up the extension. "Hi, Mr. Yao. It's Caleb calling from the Calvista," Hank said. "What do you want?" Mr. Yao asked, barely hiding the irritation in his voice. "I just wanted to call and see if you might need a handyman at one of your motels," Hank said. "Why, you know somebody?" Mr. Yao asked. "Yeah, me," Hank told him. "I spent a summer painting houses and I'm good with power tools. I know how to use a pressure hose." Mr. Yao cut him off and told him flat out that he wasn't interested. "The answer's no," Mr. Yao said. "But Mr. Yao, you didn't even let me finish," I interjected. "I don't need to let him finish. There's nothing handy about Hank. Only ma fan," Mr. Yao said and hung up. I avoided Hank's gaze when he walked back into the front office. "What's ma fa mean?" he asked. "I don't know," I lied, but I couldn't bring myself to say that ma fan in Chinese meant trouble. Chapter 27. In school the next day, Mrs. Douglas gave us back our stories. I stared at mine laying upside down on my desk. "Please read my comments," Mrs. Douglas said. "I took a lot of time writing them. I've also graded your stories." A hand shot up. "Did anyone get an A?" "Yes, of course," Miss Douglas said. "Well, did anyone get a C?" "Stop fishing, Dylan," Miss Douglas said. All around me, my classmates started turning their stories around. I looked over at Lupe and watched as she turned hers over and a big smile escaped on her lips. I looked down at my own story. With a deep breath, I turned it around. There, plastered in red ink, on the very top of my essay, was a big fat C-. 12. That's the number of exclamation marks my teacher used to describe how bad my writing was. "Check your grammar." "Tenses, Mia. Don't forget tenses. You need to proofread." The little minus sign at the top of the page winked at me, reminding me that C wasn't bad enough. It had to be a C-. I stared at all the red marks all over my story. A hot, bloody mess. In every sentence, there was something circled or crossed out. Why couldn't I ever get the tenses right? I could hear my mom's voice in my head shouting, because there's no tenses in Chinese. My mother was right. How could I possibly be as good as the other kids in their language? I should just forget about this essay contest. Who was I kidding? I didn't stand a chance. If I entered, I would just be a $300 down the toilet. I stared at my classmates, drinking in their glee as they proudly waved their stories around. I couldn't stop looking at them, showing off their grades, grinning from ear to ear. I envied them with every bone in my body. When the last school bell rang, I sulked home, my legs like jello, my feet like cement blocks. The words "you're never getting off your roller coaster" played in my head like a news ticker. I stashed my C- story deep in my closet when I got home, along with the essay contest printed out I'd been saving. I thought if I hid it, I wouldn't have to ever think about it again. But then that afternoon, the cable was acting up again, so Lupe came over. "So, what'd you get on your story?" Lupe asked. I shook my head at her. "You don't want to know," I mumbled. She shrugged. "Oh, come on, it can't be that bad," she said. I didn't say anything. "Who cares? It's just a grade," Lupe said. "You should have seen my grades when I first started going to school here." But it wasn't just a grade. It meant I was no good at writing, and how was I supposed to win a motel if I wasn't any good at writing? Before I could help it, everything came pouring out. Lupe's eyes bulged when she heard about the essay contest. For a second, I worried I'd made a terrible mistake telling her. What if she applied for herself? But then she reached over and took one of the guest comment cards and scribbled something down. She handed me the card. I looked down at it. It said, "You can't win if you don't play." I looked back up at Lupe. "But it costs $300 to play," I reminded her. Lupe shrugged. "My dad says in America you gotta pay to play," she said. I looked out the window and at her dad up on the roof, climbing down with all those thick wires around his shoulder. Suddenly, Lupe got quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "Nothing," she said. I knew it wasn't nothing, so I asked her again. "I'll be sad if you move away to Vermont," she whispered. This almost knocked me over. It hadn't even occurred to me how she might feel if I won. She had to know that there was no chance I'd win. "I just got a C-, remember?" I thought that would make her laugh, but it didn't. Lupe just kept staring at the floor. She didn't even look up when her dad came in and told her it was time to go. "See you tomorrow," I said. "See ya," Lupe muttered. As she pushed open the front office door, she turned and said, "Oh, and Mia?" "Yes." "I hope you win." Her words warmed me to my toes. All right, friends, that's it for today. I will see you next time.